Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss some of the main features in the policy document published by Labour today, in which there are calls for replacing the House of Lords with a smaller elected chamber, the constitutional right to healthcare, regardless of means to pay, and measures designed to redistribute wealth and opportunities around the country. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the last Labour Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, has been working on this policy document for the past 2 years. It's entitled A New Britain, Renewing Our Democracy and Rebuilding Our Economy. It's worth noting this is not the manifesto. It's designed to be a part of a wider consultation programme. It's not a firm commitment by Labour that all of the things in this will become manifesto promise at the next election. You know, this document is a set of aims rather than current definite Labour policy. That being said, Starmer today was giving the very strong impression that he was really behind it. We know, for example, that some Labour members of the House of Lords were expressing a little concern about the plans to abolish their positions. Now, in reality, I don't want to make this out that they're, Labour members of the House of Lords say they're not in favour of abolishing the House of Lords, as if they're acting out of self-interest. There are good reasons to be cautious as well. There's a lot in this document, and even a full Parliament of 5 years only gives you so much time to get things done. And the things that are in this policy document, although they could underpin quite a lot of government policy, it's not the entire plan. And then you can imagine as well, so what if emergencies hit again? That'll derail some government plans. But it is an indication, if Starmer wants to deliver on the policy aims in this document, he will not just have to reckon with opposition from the Tories and the media, which will be fairly robust, but potentially within his own party as well. So I'm just emphasising the fact that none of this is a definite promise yet, but that Starmer really seems to be putting his shoulder behind it. And there are some interesting inclusions. One of the ones that stands out is a constitutional right to universal healthcare. The fears at the moment with the way we're going towards privatised healthcare. But this would be the idea that everyone will have a constitutional right to be able to access healthcare regardless of their means to pay. So you don't exclude people from healthcare they need because they're unable to pay. But the major talking points will, of course, be the removal of powers from Westminster and Whitehall and spreading them around the country. This is the opposite of what the Tories have been doing, especially with Brexit being used as a blank cheque. All this nonsense about taking back control. It's quite clear that the let's take back control, the let's was not us. It wasn't the country. It was the Tories. It was their justification to centralise more and more power in their hands by claiming to be the people's representatives, despite getting significantly under 50% of the vote and making no attempt to involve others. In fact, they even excluded their own voters from the plans, as can be seen from their loss of support since that election. Remember, the Tories lost a safe seat in a by-election. So much has happened over the last year and a half, but it's worth remembering, summer 2021, before the Boris Johnson scandals, before Labour were even presenting alternatives to the public at the time, Labour were only just starting to tentatively, discuss a few policy areas. Before all that, the Tories lost a safe seat in a by-election. That was entirely down to traditional Conservative voters feeling that they were not being listened to by their own party in government. And that's, really the heart of this policy document, I think. There's a lot of aims in there. It has some detailed outcomes, like, for example, the House of Lords being replaced by a 200-strong elected chamber representing the entire country, distributed around the entire country. We don't know yet what the system. People are complaining at the moment that the the gap in this policy document is proportional representation, but we don't know that it is. For example, this new democratically elected chamber to replace the House of Lords, how will they be elected? Doesn't say. Be interesting if the consultation says, oh, we should probably use proportional representation for this. I think instead of people complaining that proportional representation isn't specifically mentioned, I think people should use it as an opportunity to say that this is what we need to discuss now. Discuss how these elected lords, so to speak, should be appointed. But anyway, you know, as I say, what the document makes clear, and what Starmer has also emphasised today, is that people feel the Westminster and Whitehall power bubble is too remote from people's lives, geographically and philosophically. You know, it's also a brilliant way, really, of undermining another Tory attack line. You know, one thing that Boris Johnson used to use a lot, there's a few Tories done the same thing. You know, whenever someone challenges them in an opposition party, they'll accuse them of being part of the Westminster elite. A little bit tricky to do that and then oppose power being taken away from Westminster, isn't it? You know, what this is it's an attempt to bring more federalism to Britain. The problem is, and this is the main challenge, it's one thing to say this is a policy and for everyone to go, oh, great policy, yeah, I agree with that. It's another thing to actually implement it. And I've tried to say this at various times in the past as well. It's not enough to have a policy. You need to have a plan, and the plan needs to work. You know, the last Labour government attempted to address these same problems, because these are the same problems, the problems we've had for a very long time. They attempted to address it and they failed. They wanted to roll out much more devolution than they did. You know, and although power was devolved to Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, people in England didn't seem as keen. You know, and yet voters in England still consider, you know, it's like, are the voters in England happy with the way central government does things? No. They think that central government doesn't reflect their interests. You know, this is at the heart of why people voted for Brexit, Starmer said today, and I agree. And it is maddening. It's literally like people in England complaining that central government doesn't understand their local issues or doesn't listen. OK, said Labour, well, we'll devolve more power to your local area so you can deal with these issues yourself. No, don't want that. You know, there are times when I actually do feel sorry for politicians. You know, yes, they should know what they're getting themselves into, and a lot of them are arseholes. But sometimes, you know, for the ones who are trying to do well, trying to help the public is like trying to get an idiot child to take its medicine. You know, I feel ill. Well, here's some medicine to make you feel better. No, I'm not taking that. Make the pain go away without your practical solutions. I want fantasy solutions. And I think this is why there are some who are underwhelmed by the report. You know, just as others, mostly Tories, are alarmed by it. You know, the Tories look at the idea of spreading power around the country and they can see what happens here. Even if they win power again in the future, it makes it a lot harder for them to behave as dictators. You know, there are measures here which would make their usual lines of corruption a bit more difficult as well. It would mean central government having less power to issue contracts. So that means less capacity to issue dodgy contracts to mates and donors. Also bans almost all second jobs for MPs as well. They'd only be allowed to undertake work needed to maintain professional registration, so for like doctors, for example. As for electing the replacement chamber for the House of Lords, bang goes a cushy little retirement number for Tory stooges as well. So you can see why the Tories would hate this. But there's more progressive voices are less than impressed as well. Various people have expressed the view that there's little in this document that's really nailed down, and that what is there will inevitably be watered down before an actual plan is worked out and implemented. And yes, of course that would be the case. It'd be ridiculous to suggest otherwise. This is not a detailed roadmap. But as I say, that is born of the fact that a lot of voters in England have shown themselves to be not that interested in greater powers for their local areas, as ridiculous as that sounds. You know, and this report was prepared by Gordon Brown. Now, he was a senior member of that Labour government who tried to bring those changes in before. Of course, he's not going to try and do the same thing in the same way and expect better results. He's not an idiot. So I think the feeling will be a softly approach, get the process started, try to show people the benefits, and then when the public are on board with it, build on it. You know, if you try to go for something really radical, something very detailed, radical, you know, I think it's a bit like if you imagine the problems, you go, okay, here are the problems. This is the comprehensive solution. And there's the risk that if you try to implement that full comprehensive solution in one go, and it fails just like it did last time, because people aren't getting on board with it, you end up with nothing. So I think what this is an attempt to say, right, okay, we tried that before and it didn't work. So maybe it's better to do something on a smaller scale that's achievable with a view to keep working on it over time. Now, finally, what I will say is I was looking through the recommendation. I think there's one that leaps out as me as being the most challenging, but also one of the most important. So this is what the recommendation is, the headline. The UK Infrastructure Bank should be given an explicit mission to address regional economic inequality. Now, it's really clear that Britain basically has a black hole in the form of London. It just sucks investment into it. You've got an accretion disk of wealth accumulating in the counties around London, and then basically desolation around the rest of the UK. You know, is it any wonder that you have some people in Wales and Scotland who want to be outside the UK, and you have people in the Midlands or the north of England who keep voting for stupid bloody things like Brexit? You know, it causes other problems as well. You know, beyond a lack of opportunities in most of the country, it creates special areas of deprivation in and around those sources of major investment because the cost of housing becomes too high for the essential workers on low wages who have to live there. You know, distributing investment around the country should be a no-brainer. The plan to shift 50,000 civil servants out of London, that would help there as well. Not only would that mean more public expenditure naturally spreads itself out a bit, but those officials, because they're no longer in London, will no longer be making such London-centric decisions either. But the problem is infrastructure and facilities, isn't it? You know, Boris Johnson once said that a pound spent in London is of more value than a pound spent in Strathclyde. Now, in terms of the balance sheet, in terms of the pure economic return for the country as a whole, yes. But that focus on the balance sheet does nothing for national cohesion, does it? Because what you're basically saying is, if you're away from London, tough, you're not an efficient use of investment in by and large. You know, so it's causing intense damage, this attitude. But it's not an easy policy to implement, and it's because redistributing investment around the country will be very good for society. It will improve people's perception of opportunities. It increases opportunities elsewhere. But for a government who will need to demonstrate good economic growth, whilst being without the very close relationship that we had with our entire continent, it's going to be very difficult. And this policy will work against it. You know, it's a policy that is incredibly important for the future of the UK, if indeed it still has a future, but there will be friction with other priorities. But anyway, those are my initial thoughts. I've not digested the whole thing yet. Let me know yours in the comments below. I will put a link to it if you want to read it yourself below, but you know, it's well over 100 pages. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.